On what was supposed to be her happiest day, she walked into a nightmare, a birthday ambush planned by her own husband and children. Divorce papers. Eviction notices. Laughter at her expense. They thought they had erased her, stripped her of her home, her business, and her worth, but what they didn't know was this: Abigail Blake was not a woman who broke easily. She was a woman who rebuilt storms into ships, betrayal into strength, and silence into strategy. Tonight, you'll witness a story of family betrayal, hidden strength, revenge, and ultimate rebirth. It's not just about losing everything, it's about discovering that sometimes the greatest power comes from standing tall when everyone expects you to fall. If you've ever believed in karma, second chances, and justice finding its way, this is a story you won't forget. Birthdays are supposed to be about love, about laughter, about the people you trust most, reminding you that your life matters. But imagine this: on the morning of your 60th birthday, instead of candles and cake, you're handed a stack of papers. Not a greeting card. Not a gift. Divorce papers. Eviction notices. Legal documents so final, so brutal, that they erase 3 decades of your existence in less time than it takes to blow out a candle. That's what happened to Abigail Brennan. The scene was staged with cruel precision. Her husband Elijah, the man she had built a business and a family with, sat at the head of the table. On his right, Nathan, their son, sharp in his courtroom suit, phone angled discreetly as if preparing evidence. On Elijah's left, Sophia, their daughter, smiling coldly, her phone raised high, recording her own mother's humiliation, and in the center of it all sat Abigail, dressed in the silk blue dress Elijah had insisted she wear that morning. She had put it on, sensing something was wrong, but refusing to give them the satisfaction of seeing her hesitate. The living room had been rearranged. The furniture pushed back like pews in a courtroom. The coffee table transformed into an altar of betrayal. Piled high with manila folders marked with yellow tabs, Nathan cleared his throat first. His voice detached, clinical, like a lawyer addressing a stranger rather than his mother. "Mom, we need to discuss some changes to the family structure and business arrangements." The words landed heavy, each one a blade carving away her identity. Elijah followed with his memorized speech. His voice trembled slightly, but the words rolled out rehearsed. "We've grown apart, Abigail. You know we have. This is best for everyone. A chance for new chapters." Sophia couldn't resist her part either. With that rehearsed cruelty only entitlement can produce, she added, "You're pathetic, Mom. Did you really think we needed you anymore? Dad built this company. Nathan has the legal expertise. I have my own career. What do you even contribute?" Her words were sharp enough to slice bone, but Abigail didn't flinch. Her hands, steady from years of balancing books, signing contracts, smoothing crises, did not tremble as she picked up the pen Elijah extended. It was the same Mont Blanc she had given him when they landed their first major contract. Once, that pen symbolized dreams. Today, it was a weapon turned against her. The cameras, her children's phones, watched closely, expecting tears, anger, maybe begging. Instead, Abigail signed each page with calm precision. Her signature flowed smoothly, one after another, like she was writing checks for groceries. Divorce decree. Business transfer. House deed. With every stroke of the pen, she appeared to shrink in their eyes, until the very end, when the last page was signed. Abigail set the pen down gently on the mahogany surface. She looked at each of them, one by one. Nathan with his lawyer's arrogance. Sophia with her smirk. Elijah with his forced composure, and then she smiled, not a bitter smile. Not a broken one. But a smile that carried something they hadn't expected: peace. A smile that said, "You have no idea what you've just done." "Thank you," she whispered. Her voice calm. Almost kind. "This makes everything so much simpler." Then, without a raised voice, without a single tear, she stood, smoothed the silk of her dress, and walked out the front door. The silence she left behind was heavier than any scream. Her children exchanged uncertain glances. Elijah shifted in his chair, as if unsure whether he had won or lost. Because deep down, even as they laughed moments before, they had expected rage. They had expected drama. They had expected Abigail to break. But instead, she left them with something far more dangerous: her composure. Out on the driveway, the old Honda Civic coughed to life. The same car they had mocked her for refusing to sell. She placed her suitcase on the passenger seat, adjusted the rearview mirror, and for the first time in 32 years, drove away with no one to answer to. Elijah, Nathan, and Sophia, it looked like victory. They had stripped her of her home, her business, her family, her identity. They thought they had erased her, but Abigail knew something they didn't. This wasn't the end. It was the beginning, and within a week, the phone calls would come, 42 desperate, panicked calls. From the same husband and children who had laughed in her face as they handed her her own erasure, because karma, as Abigail would soon prove, never waits long when betrayal runs this deep. Most people would have collapsed under the weight of what Abigail endured. 32 years of marriage, stripped away in a single morning. The empire she had poured her life into, stolen by the very family she thought she was protecting. Her children mocking her, her husband standing proudly beside the woman he planned to replace her with, but what none of them realized was this: Abigail Brennan had never been weak. She had simply been quiet. And quiet does not mean powerless. For decades, she had been the backbone of Brennan Construction. While Elijah took the credit, Abigail had been the one balancing the books, checking contracts, smoothing over supplier disputes, and catching the errors Nathan dismissed as clerical oversights. She had spent nights at the kitchen table with ledgers open, running numbers long after Elijah had gone to bed. She had cultivated relationships with clients and suppliers, knowing every detail of their lives, birthdays, preferences, trust points, and in the years leading up to this betrayal, Abigail had begun to notice cracks in her family's foundation. It started with missing inventory. A few pallets of premium flooring unaccounted for. Marble redirected to the wrong site. Elijah brushed it off as clerical mistakes. Nathan assured her the system was airtight. But Abigail, ever meticulous, knew better. She quietly opened a separate account under her maiden name, storing consulting fees Elijah considered too small to matter. She rented a storage unit, filling it with heirlooms and antiques her family believed lost or sold for years. She had been dismissed as irrelevant, the woman behind the man, the mother who ran errands while her children soared. But while they underestimated her, Abigail was preparing. Not consciously, not as if she foresaw betrayal this brutal, but as a woman who had learned that stability is never guaranteed. She had built her own kind of insurance, and there was something else they didn't know. When Abigail's children were in bed, when Elijah was out with business partners, she had spent her nights studying finance courses, legal seminars, networking quietly with attorneys, accountants, and investigators her family never even knew she had met. Knowledge had become her shield. Information her weapon. So when she signed those divorce papers on her birthday, she wasn't just letting go of a marriage. She was quietly collecting evidence. Every clause she read, every signature line, every smirk her children wore. She stored it away, piece by piece, like a chess player anticipating the endgame, because the truth was this: Abigail had always been the strategist. Her family believed they had orchestrated the perfect ambush. But in their arrogance, they left blind spots. They assumed she didn't understand legal jargon, yet she spotted the illegal non-compete clause immediately. They assumed she had no resources, yet her network of allies extended far beyond the four walls of their mansion. They assumed she would fall apart, yet her calm smile was the most dangerous weapon of all. Strength is not always loud. Sometimes it's silent, steady, waiting. That night, in the lonely hotel room that smelled of disinfectant and broken promises, Abigail unpacked her suitcase with surgical precision. She laid out her pearl necklace, the one her mother had given her at graduation, on the dresser. She placed her notebook open on the bed, her handwriting crisp and deliberate. And then she began to write every fraudulent transaction she remembered, every suspicious shipment, every whispered conversation she'd overheard through the vent above Elijah's office. Each note was another stone in the foundation of her comeback. She wasn't planning to fight them with tears. She wasn't planning to beg for scraps of what had once been hers. Abigail was planning to dismantle the empire they had stolen, brick by brick, contract by contract, until Elijah, Nathan, and Sophia were left with nothing but the wreckage of their own greed. And here's the part that makes this story unforgettable: Abigail's strength wasn't born the moment they betrayed her. It had been there all along, woven into the fabric of her life. The patience of a woman balancing accounts. The endurance of a mother raising children who would one day betray her. The quiet determination of someone who built an empire in the shadows of another person's spotlight. Elijah thought she was erased. Nathan thought she was irrelevant. Sophia thought she was pathetic. but Abigail Brennan was about to prove that the strongest storms are the ones you never see coming, until they hit, and when her storm broke, her family wouldn't just lose their stolen wealth. They would lose their legacy, their reputation, and the illusion that they had ever been in control, because Abigail's hidden strength wasn't about survival. It was about revenge. Betrayal by a husband wounds the heart. Betrayal by your own children cuts even deeper. But what Abigail discovered next went beyond betrayal. It was survival, because lurking in the shadows of her family's scheme was Patricia Lawson, the so-called widow who wore her grief like a costume and her charm like a weapon. To Elijah, Patricia was comfort. To Nathan, she was an investor. To Sophia, she was a glamorous ally with connections. But to Abigail, she was something far more dangerous, the mask behind which the true predator hid. Patricia had been circling the Brennan family for months, maybe years. Her name was whispered at charity galas, appearing in social circles like perfume that lingered too long. She was the kind of woman who turned heads in a room without saying a word, who knew how to play fragility and confidence in equal measure. To the outside world, she was a grieving widow rebuilding her life after tragedy, but Abigail knew how to listen between the lines. And Patricia's story had cracks. Her first husband? Dead at 48. Heart attack. Her second husband, Robert Lawson, the man whose name had built the Lawson construction empire? Dead at 52. Another heart attack. Both men cremated within days. Both men had increased their life insurance policies mere months before their deaths. Both had left everything to Patricia. Coincidence? That's what the courts had said. That's what Elijah had chosen to believe. That's what Nathan had filed away as irrelevant. But Abigail knew better. She had heard Patricia's name whispered through the vent that night, just before her world collapsed. She had heard Elijah's voice soften in ways it hadn't for her in years. Patricia understands the timeline, Elijah had said. She's already moved her things into the storage unit downtown. Once Abigail is out, we can start fresh. Start fresh. 2 words spoken with such casual cruelty, as if 3 decades of life could be swapped out like expired wallpaper, but the truth was, Patricia wasn't starting fresh. She was recycling the same pattern she had perfected twice before. Enter a man with wealth. Charm him. Convince him his wife was a burden, his marriage a cage. Slowly weave herself into his business. Gain access to accounts, signatures, authority. And then? Wait. Wait until the time was right. For Elijah, that time was supposed to be Abigail's birthday. Remove the wife. Hand over the assets. Bring Patricia fully into the fold, but Patricia had a mask for every occasion. To Elijah, she was tender. To Nathan, she was business savvy. To Sophia, she was indulgent, promising opportunities in the art world that money alone couldn't buy. But beneath every mask was the same cold ambition. Abigail understood something her family didn't. Patricia didn't want partnership. She wanted ownership, and ownership required elimination. That realization hit Abigail like a cold wave one night in her hotel room. As she laid out her notes and photographs, a pattern emerged. Patricia's timeline wasn't about romance. It was about strategy. Marry wealth. Absorb power. Discard obstacles. Repeat. It wasn't just Elijah who was at risk, it was anyone standing in Patricia's way. Abigail thought back to the night she had cooked Elijah's favorite dinner, knowing it might be their last meal under the same roof. She remembered the calm precision in Patricia's voice through the vent, the way she had spoken of transition like it was a business merger instead of a human life. Patricia didn't just manipulate emotions. She manipulated legacies, and Abigail, the supposed pathetic housewife her children laughed at, was the only one who saw the mask slipping. Here's the cruel irony. While her family believed Abigail had been erased, Patricia had already begun erasing them too. Elijah thought he was the mastermind. Nathan thought he was the legal architect. Sophia thought she was climbing into elite society. But they were all pawns on Patricia's board, and pawns are always sacrificed first. Abigail's betrayal no longer looked like the end of her life. It looked like an invitation, a chance to expose Patricia for what she really was. A predator wearing pearls. A widow with a graveyard of husbands behind her and Elijah Brennan's name penciled in as the next. Her husband had handed her divorce papers on her birthday. Her children had sneered, calling her pathetic. Patricia had smiled sweetly in the background, waiting for her moment, but Abigail Brennan wasn't broken. She wasn't erased. She was watching. Waiting. calculating, and she knew this story wasn't about losing a marriage or even a company. It was about survival. Patricia Lawson wore a mask. But Abigail was about to tear it off. The day Abigail closed the door of her Honda Civic and left behind the mansion she had designed, it felt like exile. The neighbors peeked from their windows, pretending to water gardens or fetch mail. They thought they were watching a woman defeated. They had no idea they were witnessing the beginning of something far more dangerous. Abigail checked into a modest hotel 12 miles away. Room 237 smelled faintly of disinfectant and damp carpet, but it had a lock, a desk, and, most importantly, silence. For the first time in 32 years, she was alone. No husband barking orders. No children rolling their eyes. No constant hum of Elijah's phone calls bleeding through the walls. Just Abigail and the storm gathering in her mind. She didn't cry. She didn't rage. Instead, she unpacked her suitcase like a soldier laying out weapons. The pearl necklace from her graduation. The watch she'd bought with her first paycheck. A notebook with crisp, empty pages. And most valuable of all, the mental snapshots of every document she had signed during her so-called birthday party. She laid them out in memory, line by line. Nathan's legal phrasing, so smug and airtight. Elijah's nervous breathing as he pushed the papers toward her. Sophia's smirk as she filmed her own mother's humiliation. But hidden in their arrogance were flaws. Clauses that didn't hold up under state law. Transfers filed too early. A timeline that could be weaponized against them. Abigail began to write, her pen scratched across the paper, filling page after page with names, dates, amounts, and suspicions. She remembered Carlos, the loyal warehouse manager who had whispered about missing shipments. She remembered the marble deliveries that had been redirected. The premium lumber that had vanished. She knew the pieces weren't accidents. They were theft. Systematic, deliberate theft. Her family thought they had stolen her future. They didn't realize she had already been cataloging their sins for years. That night, Abigail turned the hotel's flimsy desk into her war room. She pulled out a prepaid phone she'd bought months ago, just in case, she had told herself back then. Now, she finally understood why she had prepared. The first call went to Margaret Winters, her college roommate turned forensic accountant. Margaret didn't ask questions. She simply said, "Bring me everything." The second call went to James Ashford, a corporate attorney she had once helped during his own family's crisis. He answered on the second ring. "I owe you, Abigail. Tomorrow morning. My private entrance. 7 sharp." The third call was the hardest. Detective Riley Morrison. He had investigated the suspicious death of Patricia's second husband years ago. Abigail had dismissed it then as gossip. Now, she knew better. "Detective," she whispered into the receiver, "I think I have information about Patricia Lawson. And it's not just about money." By midnight, Abigail's ship had set sail. Not a vessel of wood and steel, but a vessel of secrets, allies, and carefully gathered evidence. Every page in her notebook was another plank. Every phone call was another sail. She was no longer drifting in exile. She was steering into uncharted waters, where her family's betrayal was only the first storm, and in the quiet of room 237, Abigail allowed herself one fleeting smile. Her family believed they had trapped her in the role of the discarded wife, the irrelevant mother. But what they had really done was free her from the chains of loyalty. Now she could fight without hesitation. She knew Elijah thought Patricia was his salvation. Nathan thought he was untouchable in court. Sophia thought money and status were shields against consequences. But Abigail had built her entire life in the shadows of other people's egos. She knew exactly how to dismantle illusions brick by brick. The ship she boarded that night wasn't made of mahogany and velvet like Patricia's world. It was built of grit, intelligence, and a rage so quiet it was almost invisible. And invisibility was her greatest weapon, because when a storm sails silently, no one sees it coming until the waves rise too high to escape. As she closed her notebook and turned off the light, Abigail whispered a promise into the darkness. "You thought you ended me. You thought wrong. This is only the beginning." And with that, the captain of her own secret war closed her eyes, already charting the course that would bring her enemies to their knees. Abigail had always been underestimated. Her husband saw her as the silent partner, her children as a convenience, society as a background figure in Elijah's empire. But as she sat in her dimly lit hotel room, documents spread across the bed like pieces of a broken map, she realized something profound. For the first time in decades, She was no longer following someone else's course. She was setting her own. The first sign of that resolve came early the next morning. Abigail walked into James Ashford's private office entrance at exactly 7 a.m., her notebook clutched firmly in her hand. James, a man who had seen more corporate betrayals than most judges, looked at her with sharp eyes. "You've been ambushed," he said, scanning the documents she had photographed in her mind and now laid out on his desk. "But you didn't crumble." Abigail's voice was steady. "No, James. They've made a mistake. They think they erased me. What they've really done is free me to fight." That single sentence was the moment the old Abigail died, the one who tolerated Elijah's late nights, Nathan's arrogance, Sophia's entitlement. In her place stood someone new, a woman willing to steer through storms with a captain's hand. Unflinching and precise, James outlined the legal options, pointing to Nathan's arrogance in burying unenforceable clauses. "This non-compete clause? Completely void. And this transfer of assets? Filed too early. We can unravel this, Abigail, but it'll take time." Time was something Abigail finally had, and she wasn't going to waste a second. She left James's office with more than legal advice. She left with confirmation that her instincts had been right all along. For years, she had been the unseen strategist, the quiet force keeping the Brennan family afloat. Now, stripped of title, wealth, and home, she was free to unleash the full weight of her intellect without apology, but being captain of her own fate required more than strategy. It required resolve to face humiliation without flinching. Resolve to prepare for the battles ahead. Resolve to confront not just Elijah, Nathan, and Sophia, but Patricia Lawson, the puppeteer behind their strings. Abigail's next stop was the diner 5 miles from the warehouse. Carlos sat in the corner booth, eyes darting nervously until he saw her approach. His voice trembled as he leaned forward. "Mrs. B, I stayed late last night. I recorded them. Elijah and Patricia. They're planning to liquidate the company." He slid his phone across the table, the muffled audio chilling. Elijah's voice, once warm and familiar, was now cold, transactional. "Once the divorce is finalized, we can sell off the assets faster." Patricia's reply was icier still. "The timeline is critical. If she interferes, we'll handle it. I've handled obstacles before." Abigail closed her eyes for a moment. She could almost feel the ship rocking beneath her feet, not from fear, but from clarity. Patricia wasn't just dismantling her marriage. She was planning something far worse. "Carlos," Abigail said firmly, "I need you to keep doing what you're doing. Document everything. But don't draw attention to yourself. Let them believe you're loyal." Carlos nodded, relief flickering across his face. In that instant, he saw what Elijah and the children never had. Abigail wasn't broken. She was commanding. That night, back in her hotel room, Abigail spread out her growing arsenal of evidence. She drew a timeline across the notebook page, her own kind of nautical chart. Each date, each fraudulent transaction, each whispered conversation became a marker guiding her through the storm, but what mattered most wasn't the evidence. It was her mindset. Abigail had spent years keeping the peace, softening edges, and sacrificing her own strength for the sake of family harmony. Now, harmony was gone. All that remained was justice. And justice required a steady hand on the wheel. She looked at the pearl necklace glinting faintly on the dresser. Her mother's gift, a reminder of the woman who had raised her to be strong, who had told her once, "Still waters run deep, Abigail. People mistake quiet for weakness. Let them. It's your greatest power." Those words echoed now as Abigail straightened her shoulders. Her silence had fooled Elijah. Her composure had unnerved Nathan. Her calm had confused Sophia. And soon, her strength would dismantle Patricia's carefully constructed mask. Resolve is not born in moments of comfort. It is forged in betrayal. And Abigail's betrayal had been so complete, so devastating, that it had burned away hesitation, fear, and doubt. From that night on, she was no longer just a woman trying to survive. She was the captain of her own ship, charting a course through storm and shadow. With one destination in mind, victory, and for those who had thought she was finished, the storm she was steering would be unlike anything they had ever imagined. To the outside world, Selena Lopez was dazzling. The kind of woman who seemed to glow under chandeliers, who turned heads without effort, who could charm an entire room with a single laugh. At charity galas, she sparkled in sequined gowns. At business dinners, she dazzled with carefully rehearsed intelligence, dropping the right industry terms without ever breaking a smile. Elijah believed he had found his fresh start in Selena. Nathan praised her for being a visionary partner. Sophia, always seduced by glamour, saw Selena as her gateway into elite circles, but to Abigail, watching from the shadows, Selena's brilliance wasn't light. It was camouflaged. Selena's illusion was built like a magician's trick: distract the eye, so no one sees the sleight of hand. Her diamonds sparkled just enough to hide the darkness in her gaze. Her voice softened just enough to disguise the cold calculation in her words. Her grief story, of widowhood, of tragedy, played like a well-worn script. To strangers, she was resilience personified. To Abigail, she was danger in silk. What Abigail noticed most was the way Selena tailored herself to fit every role. With Elijah, she was tender, whispering admiration into his aging ego, telling him he was still powerful, still desirable, still capable of greatness. With Nathan, she was pragmatic, pretending to be fascinated by his legal strategies, asking questions that stroked his arrogance. With Sophia, she was indulgent, praising her art gallery and promising connections with wealthy collectors, but none of it was real. Selena's glittering illusion was designed to pull them in, to make them dependent, to convince them she was the missing piece of their lives. And once she had their trust, she would strip everything bare. Abigail knew because she had seen it before, in Patricia Lawson's story, in the suspicious deaths of husbands who had trusted too deeply. Selena was cut from the same cloth. In fact, Abigail began to suspect Selena's past glitter was littered with graves. She remembered the hushed whispers at social gatherings. Selena's first husband, dead young, heart attack. Her second, Robert Lawson, gone just as suddenly. Each time, Selena emerged not broken but wealthier, climbing higher on the social ladder, her dresses brighter, her parties bigger. People wanted to believe in her. They wanted the illusion. Grief made her human, beauty made her magnetic. Charm made her untouchable, but illusions always crack. One evening, from her hotel room, Abigail received a call from Nancy Palmer, who ran the coffee shop near Elijah's office. Nancy had always been observant, her cafe a hub where secrets were spilled alongside lattes. Abigail, she whispered, your husband meets Selena here twice a week. Always the corner booth, always the same time. They think they're discreet. But I've seen the way she looks at him. It's not love. It's calculation. Abigail closed her eyes, her jaw tight. She had already guessed as much. But hearing it confirmed was another reminder that Selena's glow was an act, and Elijah, blinded by desire, had fallen straight into her trap. What made Selena truly dangerous wasn't her beauty. It was her patience. She didn't rush. She let Elijah and the children believe they were in control, all while she quietly positioned herself for the final move. She let them believe they were using her, when in truth, she was bleeding them dry, one indulgence at a time. Abigail knew a storm was coming. She saw it in the subtle cracks, the unexplained shipments, the fraudulent accounts, the whispers of life insurance changes. Selena wasn't just after Elijah's love. She was after his life, his legacy, his company. And once she secured everything, she would discard him the way she had discarded the husbands before. But here's the irony, Selena's illusion worked on everyone, except Abigail. Abigail had built her strength in silence. Learned to see past glitter, trained herself to notice what others ignored. While her family laughed at her, while they mocked her as pathetic, she had been watching, cataloging, preparing. And now, as Selena spread her charm like confetti, Abigail was the only one who could see the strings behind the curtain. Selena Lopez was not a savior. She was a thief. Not of wallets or jewelry, but of lives. And the Brennan family, so quick to betray Abigail, was about to learn what betrayal felt like when the mask of glamour finally slipped. The illusion glittered for now. But Abigail knew, the brighter the light, the sharper the shadow. And in those shadows, Selena's true face was waiting to be revealed. Storms never arrive without warning. The air shifts, the clouds gather, silence settles like a heavy blanket before the first crack of thunder. For Abigail, the days that followed her so-called birthday party felt exactly like that, an eerie calm where everyone seemed to be playing their part, unaware of what was building beneath the surface. To Elijah, life had never looked better. With Abigail gone, he strutted through the Brennan construction offices like a king without a queen, introducing Selena as a trusted advisor. He wore his victory in his posture. In the smug tilt of his chin, in the way he laughed a little too loudly at Selena's carefully placed jokes. He didn't notice the way employees avoided his gaze. He didn't hear the whispers when he left the room. Nathan, meanwhile, buried himself in paperwork, shuffling contracts and redrafting agreements with the confidence of a man who believed himself untouchable. His legal brilliance was undeniable, but arrogance blinded him to the fact that Abigail had already spotted the fatal cracks in his carefully built fortress. Sophia thrived in the glitter Selena offered. Her gallery glittered with stolen wealth, her social calendar brimming with invitations that came less from respect and more from curiosity about the Brennan family drama. She mistook the attention for admiration, not realizing people were circling to watch her eventual collapse. And Selena? Selena was radiant. She leaned into the illusion more than ever, draped in diamonds Elijah could barely afford, sipping champagne at luncheons, her laugh echoing like a bell that disguised the sharp edge of a blade. She positioned herself at Elijah's side in every meeting, her presence quiet but commanding. To outsiders, she looked like the future Mrs. Brennan, the woman who had saved a man from a loveless marriage, but Abigail saw it differently. From the safety of her hotel room, she listened. She documented. She waited. Every call from Carlos added another piece to the puzzle. Missing shipments. Dubious accounting entries. Accidental overcharges to clients. Selena was weaving herself deeper into the company's veins, poisoning it from within. And Elijah, blind, arrogant, desperate to feel desired, was letting her still. The days stretched deceptively calm. Abigail attended meetings with James, combed through financials with Margaret, and mapped the timeline with Detective Morrison. Each night, she returned to room 237 and spread the documents across the bed like a general studying battle plans. She made no sudden moves. Not yet. The storm would come, but it had to come on her terms. She moved like a shadow through her old world. At the grocery store, she overheard neighbors discussing poor Abigail, their voices dripping with pity. At the bank, she watched Selena, sign documents with Elijah at her side, her nails gleaming blood red against the dotted lines. Nobody noticed Abigail slip out quietly, invisible but listening, and all the while, her family laughed. Elijah laughed over dinners with Selena, believing he had finally escaped the weight of a wife who didn't understand him. Nathan laughed at how smoothly the asset transfers were progressing, oblivious to the trap buried in his own legal language. Sophia laughed with her new friends, posting pictures of champagne toasts on social media with captions about new beginnings. But Abigail did not laugh. Her silence was not weakness anymore. It was the quiet of the ocean before the storm surge. The kind of silence that makes birds flee and fishermen race to shore. A silence that promised the world was about to change. At night, alone in her hotel room, Abigail would sometimes stand at the window, staring at the city lights. To anyone else, she looked like a woman reflecting on her losses. But inside, her resolve burned hotter with each passing day. She thought of her mother's words, "Still waters run deep." Yes, they do. And when they finally move, they move with unstoppable force. This was the calm before the storm. And when Abigail unleashed what she had been gathering, when the tide she commanded finally broke, Elijah, Nathan, Sophia, and Selena would have no shelter left. The illusion of victory was theirs for now, but the reckoning, that was hers. The night of the gala arrived draped in velvet and lit by chandeliers that gleamed like captured stars. The ballroom of the Grand Hotel pulsed with life, waiters gliding between tables with trays of champagne, a quartet coaxing elegant music from their violins, the air thick with perfume, ambition, and secrets. Elijah adjusted his bow tie in the mirrored wall, his reflection staring back smug and satisfied. At his side, Selena glowed in a gown that shimmered like liquid fire, diamonds catching every flicker of candlelight. Her hand rested possessively on his arm, her smile sharp enough to slice through glass. Tonight, she told herself, was the night she claimed her throne in full view of the world. Nathan mingled nearby, glass of whiskey in hand, speaking in the measured tones of a man who believed himself above reproach. Every so often, he glanced toward Sophia, who was already working the room like an actress on stage, her laughter loud, her gestures dramatic, her beauty amplified by borrowed wealth. To them, this evening was a coronation. The Brennans, reborn without the weight of the wife and mother who had once held them together, but to Abigail, watching unseen from the shadows, it was theater. And she already knew how the final act would play out. From her vantage point above the ballroom, she studied every detail with the calm precision of a captain charting dangerous waters. She saw Elijah lean too close to Selena, whispering words meant only for her. She saw Sophia snapping selfies with influencers who cared more about free champagne than true friendship. She saw Nathan exchanging business cards, promising partnerships that would collapse within weeks once Abigail's carefully prepared evidence reached the right hands, and she felt none of the pain she had expected. No grief. No jealousy. Only a steady, icy resolve. The evening built toward its centerpiece, the announcement of the company's new era. Guests murmured in anticipation, raising glasses as Elijah mounted the stage, Selena at his side. Nathan flanked him, folder of documents tucked under his arm. While Sophia glowed in the spotlight as though the stage had been built for her alone, Elijah cleared his throat, smiling at the sea of expectant faces. Tonight, he began, his voice deep and rehearsed, marks the beginning of a brighter future. Brennan Construction has always stood for strength, innovation, and vision. And with the help of new partnerships and a revitalized leadership team, we are stepping boldly into that future. Applause thundered, glasses clinked. Selena leaned into the microphone, her lips curved in triumph. We are so proud to share this journey with all of you. Together, we will build not just structures, but legacies. But then came the shift. As Elijah moved to unveil a glossy banner proclaiming, Brennan Construction, a new legacy, the ballroom doors opened. The music faltered. Heads turned, Abigail stepped forward. No gown, no diamonds, no pretense. Just quiet authority in a tailored navy suit that seemed to command the very light around her. She didn't rush, didn't stumble. Her heels clicked against the marble floor in a rhythm that silenced the room more effectively than any announcement could. Elijah froze, the banner half unveiled. Selena's smile wavered, her manicured hand tightening on his arm. Nathan's glass slipped slightly in his hand, though he recovered quickly. Sophia lowered her phone mid-selfie, her expression twisting from amusement to disbelief. Abigail reached the edge of the stage and paused, letting the silence stretch, letting every guest lean forward in curiosity. Please, she said at last. Her voice calm, steady, resonant. Continue. I wouldn't want to interrupt. The words cut sharper than any accusation. Elijah tried to laugh, but the sound cracked. Abigail, he stammered, this is unexpected. Unexpected? She tilted her head, her eyes sweeping over the glittering crowd, then back to him. No, Elijah. Unexpected is finding out your husband and children are planning your erasure through the heating vent. Unexpected is being served divorce papers on your birthday by the very people you fed, clothed, and built an empire with. Tonight? Tonight is inevitable. Gasps rippled through the ballroom. Murmurs spread like fire through dry grass. Selena stiffened, her smile replaced by a glare that could have shattered glass. Sophia shrank slightly, her bravado slipping, while Nathan's face hardened into a mask of legal calculation. Abigail reached into her bag and pulled out a folder. She set it on the podium with deliberate care, flipping it open to reveal document after document, contracts, financial statements, photos. Each page marked with evidence. These, she said, her tone razor sharp, are the real foundations of your new legacy. Fraud. Theft. Lies. Partnerships signed in blood, not ink. Her words landed like thunderclaps. Every guest leaned closer, every whisper feeding the storm. Elijah's face drained of color. Selena's hand slipped from his arm. Nathan's carefully constructed confidence cracked, his eyes darting like a trapped animal. Sophia's phone hung limp at her side, forgotten. And Abigail? She smiled, not with cruelty. Not with vengeance. But with freedom. The gala, meant to celebrate betrayal disguised as rebirth, had transformed into a public unmasking. The glittering illusion shattered under the weight of truth. And there was no curtain heavy enough to hide what had been revealed. The storm had broken, and Abigail stood at its center, not as a victim, but as its architect. The ballroom, moments ago a theater of champagne and crystal laughter, had turned into a battlefield of whispers, gasps, and fractured illusions. The storm Abigail had carried silently within her for months now raged in the open, and there was no stopping the waves. Elijah's voice cracked first, desperate and hollow. This is slander. Lies. His hand slammed against the podium, rattling the microphone. The sound echoed too loudly, betraying the panic he tried to mask. But no one looked convinced. His eyes darted across the crowd, searching for an ally, a lifeline. All he found were raised brows and murmured disbelief. Selena's reaction was sharper, venom dripping from every syllable. You've planned this, haven't you? She hissed at Elijah under her breath, though the microphones caught every word. You swore this was handled. You told me she was finished. Her diamond-studded hand trembled as she pulled away from him. Distancing herself as though betrayal were contagious, Nathan clenched his jaw, stepping forward with his lawyer's mask fixed tightly on his face. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, his voice pitched to sound reasonable, my mother is understandably emotional. Emotional? Abigail's laugh cut him off, low and devastating. No, Nathan. Emotional is crying in silence when your own son conspires to erase your name from the company you helped build. This, she tapped the folder of evidence, isn't emotion. It's fact. Gasps rippled again, sharper this time. Guests shifted in their seats, their gazes pinning Nathan as though he were already on trial, and Sophia, poor, polished Sophia, stood frozen, her phone dangling limply in her hand. For the first time that night, her mask of glamour cracked. Mom, she whispered, barely audible, you weren't supposed to. Her voice trailed off, drowned by the tide of judgment swelling around her. The gala dissolved into chaos. Reporters, who had been invited by Sophia for publicity, now turned their lenses on Elijah, Selena, Nathan, and Sophia, snapping photos that would headline tomorrow's papers. CEO accused of fraud. Family betrayal unveiled. The words practically wrote themselves in the hum of flashing bulbs. Selena grabbed her clutch, her red lips curled in fury. I won't go down with you, she spat at Elijah. Not for your failures. Not for her revenge. She stormed off, photographers chasing her like hungry wolves. Nathan, cornered, tried to salvage control. He lifted the microphone again, his hands trembling. This is a family matter. Confidential. Not for public spectacle. But his voice broke on the last word, and that crack was all it took. Guests laughed, not kindly, but cruelly. Abigail didn't need to speak further. Her silence carried more weight than all their excuses. She turned, her heels steady, her back straight, and walked out of the ballroom as though she were the only one still in command. And in truth, she was. The sea outside mirrored the storm inside. Waves slapped against the ship's hull, the night wind howling as though echoing the truth revealed within those gilded walls. On deck, Abigail leaned against the railing, the salt air cool against her skin. For the first time in years, she inhaled deeply and felt no weight pressing against her chest. Behind her, the echoes of chaos grew, Elijah shouting at Nathan, Sophia sobbing, Selena's heels clicking furiously down the hall. But none of it touched Abigail. Instead, she let her mind drift to what came next. Evidence secured. Allies waiting. Investigations already in motion. She hadn't just exposed them, she had timed it perfectly so the consequences would ripple far beyond this single night. Their empire, stolen brick by brick, would crumble faster than they could rebuild. A crew member approached quietly, saluting with the respect she had earned long before this night. Captain, he said, his voice steady, are you ready to resume command? Abigail turned, her expression softening just slightly. She nodded. Yes. Set the course. As she stepped back into the ship's bridge, the world behind her spun into disarray. Elijah argued with reporters. Nathan frantically dialed numbers that went unanswered. Sophia's sobs carried down empty hallways. Selena vanished into the night, her glittering illusion shattered beyond repair. But Abigail? She stood at the helm, her hands steady on the wheel. The sea didn't care for lies. The ocean demanded truth, and it had chosen its captain well. That night, as dawn slowly painted the horizon gold, the guests whispered about what they had witnessed. Some said it was the most shocking betrayal they had ever seen. Others called it justice long overdue. But all agreed on one thing: Abigail Blake was no longer the forgotten wife in the shadows, she was the storm, and storms leave nothing untouched. The storm had passed, but its echoes lingered in every corner of the ship. For Abigail, the aftermath was not chaos but clarity. For the first time in decades, she wasn't defined by Elijah's shadow, Nathan's ambition, or Sophia's scorn. She was defined by herself, and that was more than enough. Morning spilled across the horizon, painting the sea in soft shades of gold. Abigail stood at the bridge, her uniform crisp, her presence unshaken. Around her, crew members moved with quiet reverence, no longer seeing her as a wife discarded, but as the captain who had commanded not just a ship, but her own destiny. She placed both hands on the wheel. the cool leather steady beneath her fingers. Once, she had signed away her home, her business, her family, with trembling ink. Tonight, she held something far greater, command over her future. From the deck below, she heard faint voices. Guests whispered about the revelation, about Elijah's disgrace, about Selena's flight into humiliation. Nathan and Sophia had retreated into silence, their bravado shattered. And though their betrayal still burned, Abigail found herself feeling something unexpected, not vengeance, but release. For years, she had carried them. Carried their futures, their ambitions, their egos. And what had they given in return? Cruelty. Mockery. Erasure. But now the weight was gone. The burden wasn't hers anymore. One of the crew approached, a young woman no older than Sophia, her voice tentative. Captain Blake. Permission to ask a personal question? Abigail smiled faintly. Go ahead. The girl hesitated. When they laughed at you? When your own children stood against you? How did you not break? Abigail turned to the horizon, her eyes reflecting the rising sun. Because breaking would have meant they'd won. And I didn't survive all these years, all these storms, just to hand them my strength on a silver platter. Sometimes, she added, her voice steady, the greatest revenge isn't shouting or striking back. It's standing tall when they expect you to fall. The girl nodded, her eyes glistening, as though she had just been handed a truth she would carry for life. Later that day, Abigail walked the length of the ship. Passengers stopped her, thanking her, not for exposing a scandal, but for showing resilience. Some whispered their own stories of betrayal. A husband who had left. A child who had turned cold. A friend who had stolen. They looked at her as though she were proof that survival was possible. At the stern, she paused, watching the waves crash against the hull. Each swell was a reminder, storms come and storms go, but the sea remains eternal, just like strength, if you choose to claim it. Elijah tried once more to reach her. He appeared at the edge of the deck, disheveled, eyes sunken. Abigail, he pleaded, his voice hoarse. You've made your point. Enough. Please. Don't let it end like this. She regarded him calmly, as one might regard a stranger asking for something they could never give. It didn't end like this, Elijah. It ended the day you chose greed over loyalty. All I did was let the truth sail to the surface. He flinched, as though her words carried more weight than a scream ever could. We can fix this, he begged, his voice cracking. Abigail shook her head. No. You broke it. And now, you'll live with it. I already have my freedom. That's something you'll never touch again. She walked away, her steps measured, her back unbending. Behind her, Elijah's voice faded into the roar of the waves. That evening, under the glow of lanterns strung across the deck, the passengers gathered once more, not for scandal, but for a farewell toast. Abigail stood before them, no longer a wife defined by betrayal, but a captain defined by resilience. My life, she began, her voice carrying steady across the sea air, was nearly stolen from me, not by strangers, but by the people I trusted most. And for a time, I thought that meant I had nothing left. But standing here tonight, I realize that what I gained is worth far more than what I lost. Because what I gained is me. Applause rose, not thunderous, but heartfelt, the kind that wrapped around her like a promise. For the first time in years, she felt truly seen, not as someone's wife, not as someone's mother, but as Abigail Blake. When the crowd dispersed and the night grew quiet, Abigail remained at the helm, the sea stretching endlessly before her. She whispered into the wind, a vow not to her family, not to the past, but to herself. From now on, I chart my own course. And with that, she steered the ship forward into open waters. The storm was over. The past was behind, she was her own captain now, and nothing, no betrayal, no storm, no wave, would ever sink her again. And so, the woman they tried to erase became the storm they could never survive. Her husband lost everything. Her children learned the price of betrayal. And the mistress? She drowned in the very lies she thought would make her rich. But Abigail? She rose. Stronger. Freer. Untouchable. She didn't just survive, she thrived. She didn't just rebuild, she became the captain of her own destiny. So the next time someone tells you that betrayal is the end, remember her story. Sometimes betrayal isn't your downfall, it's your rebirth. If this story left you holding your breath, hit that like button. Share your thoughts in the comments. What part struck you the hardest? And don't forget to subscribe for more stories of family secrets, revenge, and life-changing resilience, because in the end, storms don't just destroy. Sometimes, they set you free.